So getting started on our elephant head, we're going to make a circle that's 30 stitches around. This will be the instructions to round 5. So at the end of round 5, you'll have a circle with 30 stitches. And what we're going to do is essentially we're going to fold this in half, and we'll be working on these stitches for the head and then working on these stitches for the trunk. And then that's going to give us a head that goes off in this direction and our trunk that goes off in this direction, and gives us the elephant head shape and the trunk that stands up real nice. So to do that, in round 6, we're going to skip 12. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And in that 13th stitch, going to do an SC, and then SC the rest of the way around. It's another 17 stitches. So 2, and that's our first, our last stitch. So now we have this hole over here for our trunk and this hole over here for our head, and a gap in the middle. So to do the head, we're only going to work around these stitches, and we're going to ignore these ones until we get to the trunk. So we need to do 2 stitches around, or 2 rows around of just SCs, working even. And see if, as we're just going around in a circle without joining, you're going to see that stitch that we skipped just kind of disappears. Or, well, not stitch that we skipped, but section we skipped. Okay, so that's the end of round 8. Then we're going to do 3 increase rows. So it's going to be 1, 2, and then an increase. So just 2 SC in that next stitch. And we're going to do that 6 times around. So 1, 2, an increase, that's 2. 1, 2, and an increase, that's 3. 1, 2, and an increase, that's 4. 5, and 6. So that's the end of round 9. We're going to do 2 more increase rows, the next one doing 3 SCs in between the increases, and the one after that doing 4 SCs between the increases. After round 11, we're going to work 12 through 17, just working even. That's 6 rounds worked even of 36 stitches. And so we're going to do those 6 rounds, and I will see you there. So at the end of round 17, we have our elephant, and he's starting to look like he has a head. So we have 36 stitches around, and we did that for 6 rounds. And now we need to put our safety eyes in, and they need to obviously be centered on either side of our trunk hole here. And they're going to be between round 11 and 12, which is your last increase round, which ends here. So this would be 11 and 12 right here. So I'm going to kind of guess on placement here because I'll show you how we can count this out. Let's stick in our eye. And then we want there to be 9 stitches showing in between them. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So the next one would end up right here. And yeah, I think that looks about right. So with 9 stitches apart on either side of the trunk, boy, he looks weird with just a trunk hole. That's what that would look like. And so you can see how those are centered on either side of his little trunk. There. And so I'm going to bust out my nifty little tool here. I have this guy to put safety eye backs on because I like my nails and I don't like destroying them. So put my back on, and then you just fit the end of this over. Oops. And press down. So same with this one. And fit this over. And that puts those on there nice and tight. And then I don't have to worry about them coming off, and I didn't have to break a nail. Hot diggity. So round 18 is going to start decreasing. So we're going to do 4 SEs and then a decrease 6 times around. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a decrease. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a decrease. And I will put a link in the blog post to how to do that invisible decrease. 2, 3, 4. It just does a little bit better job of hiding your decreases, and you don't get those big triangular shaped clusters. So you can see the only sign of a decrease we have is this slanted stitch here. And this last decrease here. Alright, and we're going to do the next decrease round the same way, but with 3 stitches in between decreases. So 1, 2, 3, and then a decrease. 1, 2, 3, and then a decrease. And so I think you get the idea of how the decreases work. The next one we're going to do is going to have 2 SCs before the next decrease. And then the round after that we'll have 1 SC and then a decrease. And about that time you're going to have a hole here that's just big enough to start stuffing in. The nice thing is you also have a hole on this end to stuffing in. So I would suggest stuffing this guy as full as you can get him while you have 2 holes exposed. That way you can get this nice and poofy too. So I'm going to go ahead and get down to round 21 so you guys can see what he looks like stuffed before I close him up, and then how to close. I have our little fellow all stuffed. We're down to row 21, so all I have left to do is 1 more round of decreases and I can close. You can see I stuffed it pretty full on this end, and then I stuffed pretty darn full in the front too. With this as even to the top as I can, I want to still be able to work on these stitches easily, so I'm going to stuff the rest of the trunk as I go. But I made sure that the nose right here is good and stuffed, because that's going to be super hard to do when we start the trunk. So he's nice and stuffed and fluffy. And we're going to put this last round of decreases on him. I'll try to keep this far enough away from the camera you can still see. So it's kind of hard when his head's getting this big. Yeah. It's kind of hard on this last round to see what you're doing, so it helps to kind of turn so you can see ahead. Alrighty, so we have our last round done. We only have 6 stitches left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to cut our yarn and pull this all the way through the last stitch. I'm counting that as binding off. And then thread what's left of our tail through a needle, like so. And then going into these guys, I like to do this now. So I've changed things up a bit. Through the front loop only, I do 6 stitches like this. So there's 3, 4, 5, 6. And then when you pull them tight, they kind of almost make like a flower. You can see it's real tiny. So the first thing we've got to do to start the trunk of our elephant is get to work on these 12 stitches that we skipped when we were doing his head. So remember, we started here and we made a circle, and then we pinched that circle in half and worked the 18 stitches on this side. Now we've got 12 left over here that are going to make his trunk. So to do that, we need to do an SC join in this end of the trunk. So this isn't going to be the starting point. The starting point of every round is going to be over here. That's just going to make the decreases easier. So to do an SC join, it's in your instructions. You put your loop over the hook. You count your stitches to get to the right one. So in this case, it was the 7th stitch from the starting point there. Pull a loop up through the stitch and then pull through both loops on the hook. Now what that's going to do is create an SC. See, there's our V's, at the same time that it joins your yarn to the trunk. So that way you don't have a messy slip stitch in there for where you added your yarn. You do them both at the same time. So then I stuffed my tail down in here so that I don't have to deal with it anymore. And to get back over here, we got to do 5 stitches to get to the gap. So here's 1, 2. I'm trying to make this as easy to see as possible, but it's kind of hard with his face in the way. it will get easier, I promise. These first couple rounds when you're just now closing this up is kind of messy and hard, but you can do it. I know you can. So what we're going to do now is close up this hole. Now if I were to just work straight across and close the hole like this, I'd have this great big hole here. It's a pretty good size hole, right? So what we need to do instead, or what I like to do instead, this is totally optional, is reach down here and see there's a gap and there's like a crossbar in the gap right here. I like to draw up a loop under that crossbar and then go to my first stitch on the next round or the next section and draw up a loop there and kind of treat it like a decrease. So I'm going to go through all stitches on the hook, and now that gap, see, is much smaller. That hole, it's still there, it's still a little hole, but it's much smaller than it was and much more manageable. So now we gotta go back to where our starting point is. So we keep going around till we get back to our SC join. So there we go. We're back to our SC join, and as you can see, so here's our SC join. There's a stitch here, so there's one, see it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 stitches. So we've worked on all of our stitches, and because we put in our little fake decrease there, we don't have as big of a hole. So then we got to work 2 rounds even, and since we are working in continuous rounds and not slip stitching, I'm just going to go straight on from my last stitch into our SC join first stitch and work 12 stitches around this trunk. And like I said, I'm trying really hard to make this easy to see. This particular part is kind of hard to see because there's a big old elephant head flopping around. So we've done 12 more stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So, and our starting point is still on the outside of his nose. So that's our goal. So right now I'm going to add a little bit of stuffing because I've gone a little ways. And with the trunk, we're going to have to stuff as we go because his head's already full. So we have no other way to do it other than to stuff as we go as his trunk gets smaller and smaller. And that's going to get harder and harder. So it's a lot easier to do a little at a time. And see, you can see we still have a little bitty hole there. We can go back and sew that up with a needle at the end is what most people end up doing. Or you can just leave it. Most of the time it's not big enough for stuffing to get out. If you're giving this to little kids, I would definitely sew that up. But otherwise, I most of the time just leave it. We're going to start doing our decreases. And what this is going to do is we're going to decrease on this end here. And it's going to make our trunk bend up and back this way. And we're going to bend it slowly up and back this way and then bend it around like this so that it makes our heart shape. So in order to do that, we need to go 5 stitches around. Oh dear. That's ugly. And then do a decrease. And then we're going to do 5 stitches back to our starting point. So 2, 3, 4, and 5. back to our starting point. So then we're going to do work another SC evenly around, and this one will be 11. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. All right, so now you see we're kind of shifting this way as stitches tend to do. So we're still going to go, to do our next decrease, we're still going to go 5 on this side to get to these 2 that are right at the top of the nose, and then 4 down the other side. So the stitch counts will start to make a little more sense as you see this. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then our decrease so that it's straight across right there on the top of the nose, and then 4 stitches back to our starting point. And you'll see that now we have 10 stitches instead of 11. Huzzah! So we should probably add more stuffing again, since we're getting, my rule of thumb is if it's dark in there and I can't see, there's probably not enough stuffing. So I stuff until it's not dark anymore. There we go. No more darkness. Alright, so now we're going to work our 10 stitches around even. Okay, so here's where we start decreasing every round, and we're going to decrease every round for 5 rounds. Sorry, I actually had to look at my instructions there. We're going to decrease every round for 5 rounds. So right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So our next round is going to have a decrease down to 9. Again, like I was saying, we're going to go the same distance to get there, but not as far coming back. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches to get to our center point on the nose, decrease, and then 3 back. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, decrease, 1, 2, 3. Alright, now we gotta do another decrease, and we're going after this one. So again, 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, decrease, and 2 back. Alright, and it's dark in there again, so we should probably add a little more stuffing. And now's where it gets tricky. See, my fingers don't really fit down there anymore. So I can't hang on to it the way I was hanging on to it, so now I kind of press things flat so I can see what I'm doing. So I'll do my best to make that easy to see, but when we're working in tiny spaces like this, this is just a difficult part to see, no matter what you do. So again, we've got to go all the way around to these 2 stitches, and we're only 1 stitch away from them now with our starting point. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to those 2, and then just 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, decrease, and 1. And then obviously this next time around we gotta go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and not do any stitches after the decrease. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and our decrease. So you'll see that, and this is kind of hard to see in this color, but here's our first decrease, our second, and our third. This was where we went to 9 stitches, then 8, then 7, then 6. So we are down to 6 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is a teeny tiny circle. This is about as small a circle as I let things get, just because this is about as small a circle as is still easy to work with. But you'll see, so now we've got our circle down. We've been decreasing. I got to squeeze this stuffing around in here a little bit. We've been decreasing evenly on one side, so his trunk is curving up this way, nice and curvy, just the way we want it. But now we've got to make it curve this way, and conveniently enough, our starting point is now on the other side of our circle. In order to do that, we first need this off. We're going to make this last little bit of a trunk look a little bit more like a nose. We don't want it to just be boring old 6 stitches like that, right? Gotta be a little more nose-like. So we're gonna work 1 round even. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then we're gonna work a little bit of an increase on that underside again to make it pull down and look like it opens up just a tiny bit. So we're going to work 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. Put an increase right here. And then work our last 2 stitches in the round. We have 7 now. That's okay. We're going to leave it at 7. We're going to work 1 round even with 7 stitches. So tiny. Ah. And there we have it. So 7 stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now we have a little bit more of a bell shape to our nose. So we can cut our yarn now, finally, at long last. And we have trunk. Ta-da! Let's move this mess. If you want to stuff this part, and this is one of my mini cheats, with your bag of polyfill, you usually get a dowel. And this is literally the purpose of the dowel, is so you can stuff small objects. So, don't overstuff that joint. It will make it really hard to bend. But if you need to stuff, because you just feel better that way, use a dowel. Makes life a lot easier. And that's why they put it in the bag. So, get that down there just a little bit farther. There we go. Cute, right? Yay! So next we just have to close up our nose, and I'm going to show you. I want to close this up so that it has some shape to it and has like an outline around the outside edge. So instead of going through the outside loops like I usually do, I'm going to go through the inside loops. And do just like I always do. Go around 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and pull. And you'll see we kind of left a little frame around the nose that way. Finished trunk. So once you stuffed it, it got kind of messed up because we stuck a dowel in it, poor guy. So give him a good squeeze. Smoosh. Smoosh. It's the nature of stuffing, isn't it? I love when they say manipulate the stuffing accordingly. I'm like, yeah, you mean smash it. Okay, so here we go. Here he is with his nose just the way we want it. Just half of a heart, exactly the way we need it to be. Okay, so to make the ears for the next elephant, we're actually going to make the same ear as the beginner elephant. We're just going to add one little bit of shaping to it that the beginner ear doesn't have. So we're going to start out with a chain 4. And then we're going to do 5 DCs in the 4th chain from the hook, so this last chain here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that'll actually give us 6 DCs because you count this first chain 3 as a DC. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so then we're going to chain 1 or turn and chain 3 to start our next row of DCs. So we've flipped our work over. We're going to DC in the same stitch as the chain 3. That'll create an increase, and then we're going to do a DC increase in every stitch across. So there's increase, and that just means 2 DCs in the same stitch. So we're putting 2 DCs in this stitch, 2 DCs in this stitch, 2 DCs in this stitch. And since we count our chain 3 at the beginning as a stitch, we're going to do 2 DCs in the top of the starting chain 3. So you've increased all the way across. You're having this nice little half circle here. So we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to turn and chain 3. And again, we're going to work into that same DC as our starting chain, or as our turning chain. Then work 1 DC in the next stitch, then an increase in this stitch, and 1 DC in the next stitch, and we're going to keep doing that all the way down. So increase, then 1 DC, increase, then 1 DC, increase, one DC, increase, and then 1 DC in the last stitch, which is the top of our turning chain from the previous row. Okay, so you see it's growing and it's got a little bit of a curve to it, and that's perfectly normal. So you kind of want it to do that, obviously. So we're going to do one more row of that. So chain 3 and turn. In that first stitch, we're going to work a DC, and that counts as our first increase there. So then we're going to do 2 stitches with 1 DC in them, like so. So 2 DCs and an increase, and 2 DCs, and we're just going to keep that up all the way across. Increase, 2 DCs, increase, 2 DCs, increase, 2 DCs, increase, and then DC in the last stitch and DC in the top of the turning chain, which is our last stitch in that row. So now we have our ear. It's nice and big, just the way we want it, but we also want to curve. What we're going to try to do is curve this down so that we have an ear that's shaped like this instead. And then we will attach it to the body along this side, or the head along this side, so that it looks like a nice big curvy ear. So all we got to do that, so we have our last stitch on the hook here, so we're going to just go all the way back to the very beginning, that chain stitch that we worked our first 5 DCs into, way back at the beginning in the knot. We're just going to slip stitch into that one and then pull it tight. It's going to leave a little opening here, so that we're going to sew shut. Here, I'll show you. So we're going to cut off our yarn, leaving a nice long tail so we can use this tail to sew the ear to the body when we get there. We're going to thread a needle and just use that tail and sew this little section here closed. Shouldn't take more than a couple of stitches. That also conveniently moves your sewing tail to one end of the ear, so that when you go to sew this to the body now, you're going to have a nice stitch to start, and start at the top and work your way down. sewing this to the head of your elephant. So you just got to make 2 of those. The nice thing is you can flip this inside out if you discover that you've made 2 that are identical and you need an ear that turns on the other side. So this one can attach here, and then you need to attach one on the other side. So yeah, flip it, do it like this. But this fold is always going to be facing forward, so depending on which side of the head you put it on depends on which direction you need to fold the ear. So nice and easy, and we can add that next to our head. For the ears on our elephant, we're going to start marking stitches, and this is my favorite way to do attachments. I don't like to pin the piece directly on here and then hope it doesn't fall off. While I'm sewing, I like to mark the stitches that I'm going to be working in and out of, and then I can kind of put it where I need to put it. So what I did here was, for our ears, we're going to be working around round 17. If you're working backwards, it's the last round before we started decreasing to close. So you find that last round that doesn't have a decrease in it right here. So here's our tiny decrease, invisible decrease. The last round that has no decrease in it. And then position 2 pins 3 stitches apart, as close to what you think the middle between the eyes is. And this is where I found my middle. So this is where the edges of my 2 ears will start. Then you count 12 stitches down the side and mark it again. And that's because our ear is going to span 12 stitches when we sew it to the ear, or to the head. On the underside, you'll see that they are slightly off from each other, and that's because in here, right along in here somewhere, is our row change, the place where we shifted from one row to the next. So as we went around, these are going to be a little bit, or the pins are going to look a little off. When you get the ears on, you will not be able to tell the difference, I promise. You really can't. But you can tell a little bit if you try to jog them so that they're even on the top and the bottom. It's a lot easier to just make sure they're straight, and doing it this way will make sure they're straight. So I'm just going to show you real quick. I've threaded a needle through our ending tail of our ear, the one that we used to sew it closed. So I have it here, and that's the tail we're going to start in at the very top here. We're just going to go in where our pin is and come up through the next stitch next to it. Now at this point we can take our pin out and get it out of the way, because all we needed was that starting point. Now here's where, if you're a pinner, you're welcome to pin, but if you look there, here's the line. I'll just put the yarn on it, that works. There's the line that we're going to be working on right there. So I'm just going to kind of lay my ear on that line, and the bottom of my ear is touching the other pin, so I know I'm in the right place here. So then I'm just going to go up through my ear, down through the same stitch I was just in, which I now can't see. There we go. Down through the stitch I was just in, and up through the next stitch, then up through my ear, and down through the stitch I was just in. We're going to keep going like that all the way around, or along that line. And if you want to like hold it still so that you know your end is still going to line up in the same place, that's always a good idea. And then up through that, so that's that hole that our last pin is in. I always make sure that I've got the end of the ear after I've come up through that hole, and then I can go back down through the same hole and back up through the past one to make sure that that's going to be coming in and out of the same place I want it to, so it stays nice and strong right there. So there's our ear attachment. Whoa, that was kind of crazy. There's our ear. Sorry, it focused on his nose there. All nice and attached, and you can see when we have both of them on, it'll look like a nice little happy elephant. And they curve nicely because we did a 6-stitch increase, so that's a nice curve to his ears. So now we can make his buddy, and we can attach their heads.